that an empowering question never, ever, ever starts with the word why. Never. Why brings in defensiveness, which brings in the ego, which brings in emotions. And when emotions go up, intelligence goes down. It's true for every human being. Even my clients who are in business, entrepreneurs who are beating themselves, why can't I do this and why can't I do that? They're shaming themselves. Then they get defensive and create a story, and you get caught in a loop, and it doesn't get you anywhere. So great leaders ask great questions. Ask ourselves, how would the leader I want to become do the thing I'm about to do right now?
Hey, I'm Reverend Jocelyn, a minister of healing, speaker, and women's ministry coach. I grew my ministry from a simple blog to a national Christian trauma healing movement. And now I help women to answer their call to build purpose-driven ministries and businesses. Welcome to Reverend Jocelyn Talks, where healing meets purpose. Hey family, it's your sister Reverend Jocelyn here. I'm so glad that you are tuning into another episode of Reverend Jocelyn Talks, where I have the opportunity to connect with amazing sisters who are doing great work for the kingdom of God, and they are all about making impact. Now today, I have the special pleasure of interviewing someone who I get to call my coach, Coach Carol Boston. She is an award-winning speaker, an international best-selling author, and she is known as the queen of Reframe. Now, she's done some other cool things in her background, like she happened to be a professional tennis player. She helps business owners. Actually, she's an award-winning business coach. But I'm going to let you get to know a little bit about her. And so, Coach Carol, I am so glad to have you here with me today. Thank you for accepting my invitation.
I'm excited to be here. You have a great tribe. I love the people in your tribe.
Thank you. And I get to call you a part of my tribe. You're a part of my community and circle. And
Yes.
you've played such a major role in my life, helping me to grow my ministry, grow my business, grow my impact. And so I want my audience to get a chance to know who the great Carol Boston is. And so before we get into what you're doing now, I would love to know a little bit about your backstory in terms of how did you become this award-winning business coach? What's the story behind all of this?
The story is God closed every other door. There I was. It was in the summer. Listen, I did not sign up to be a business owner. I was initially the first few years, not the first few months, the first few years. I've been around for a while now. I was known as the reluctant entrepreneur. I literally was brought onto podcast as the reluctant entrepreneur. So it was in the summer of 2014. I'm sitting there. I had walked the stages, gotten the awards, been in sales for Fortune 100 companies for 26 years, sold $70 million in revenue. And I thought, I could do this in my sleep. I have got it made. Then I got a phone call that told me they were cutting my territory by 80%. And I said, 80%? I've been building this territory for 6.5 years. Now I was in a challenging personal relationship, and they kept poking the bear saying, they're setting you up to fail. They're setting you up to fail. I was a weird salesperson. I loved large corporate structure, and I'm a rule follower. Not true for most people in sales in corporate America. And I didn't really want to leave. I loved my boss. I kept thinking I could figure this out. But a friend of mine whispered in my ear about this opportunity with this small up and coming company. So I went on the interview. I thought, I don't know what I don't know. And after 2 interviews, they offered me the position, doubled my base salary, and gave me my first director title. I could just see the potential. Now, 6 weeks into this job, I was on vacation. I had negotiated that up front in my contract because we'd already paid for the vacation. So ladies out there, if you've never been to Albuquerque, New Mexico for the world's largest hot air balloon festival, you got to go. Bucket list. Now, I don't advocate this for my clients now, but all those years ago, I thought I was doing the right thing by staying in touch with my boss, the CEO, while I was on vacation. I in a new job and all that. So I get this email asking my opinion on something, and I replied right back. And I waited and waited because he usually replies right back, and he didn't. We went out. We enjoyed our day. We came in that night. I will never forget. We walked in. Ding. There goes my phone. Said, Carol Boston, you have mail. I opened it up, and Jocelyn, I'll never forget what it said. It said, Carol, comma, that's what you really think? And it had 5 question marks behind it. Then it said, do not come into this office on Monday. When your vacation is over, you are done here.
No,
Yes,
no way.
true story. I looked at my partner and said, did I just get fired? I don't get fired. And she's like, yeah, in an email that you were asked an opinion for. True story. Now, back then, one of the reasons I help my female clients now advocate for themselves is because I didn't do it. I had never been fired. Florida was an at-will state. I thought, "Well, I guess I can get fired for anything. I don't know." But I came back and I had an interview the very next day, and I was flown all over this country. I'm in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and one of the companies flew me to California 3 times, paid for airfare, hotel, crickets, no job offer. I spent my entire 401(k) looking for a job. Why how is that possible? I didn't know how to separate my who from my do. All
Ooh, ooh, say that one more time.
I didn't know how to separate my who from my do. I had tied my identity into, I am a buttoned up corporate sales professional. You've heard me say
Mm.
my next book's gonna be called You Can't Read the Label When You're Inside the Jar. And
Yes, I'm waiting for it.
we're all in a jar, and that's where I was. I was in my jar. I couldn't see anything else other than what I had known for 26 years, and literally, that was my identity, Jocelyn. I'd say, "I am." Think about what we say after the words, "I am." And we create that, and I said, "I am a corporate sales professional." That's all I could see. So, fast forward many, many, many months into this process, I spent my entire 401(k) looking for a job, and I'm basically yelling at God in my prayer time, and I'm like, "Look, you created me. You know I am not cut out to be an entrepreneur. Would you please help me get a good job?" Well, my God has a sense of humor because literally 2 weeks to the day from that prayer, out of the blue, I get an email from a woman that I met one time at a conference, and she gifted me a $3,500 ticket to go to Los Angeles, to go to Guerrilla Business School, which is a foundational school to learn about what? Entrepreneurship. I said, "I
Mhm.
don't know what I don't know," and off I went. And the very first thing I learned, right, in leadership and in was empowering questions, and I was amazed, and I was determined to master them, and I've been working to master them now for 10 years, over 10 years. It was in May of
I
2015.
I love that, Coach Carol. Like, even though you wouldn't have chose that route for yourself, it seemed like it was a holy setup for you. And since then, like you are known as the queen of reframe and you are known for asking empowering questions. And so I would love to dive deeper into why is it so critical to ask the right questions when you are in business?
I'm trying and the name escapes me. I wanna say Albert Einstein, but it wasn't him, who said if I was given 1 hour to come up with an answer and my life depended on it. In other words, if I don't he said I'd spend the first 55 minutes crafting the perfect question because once I have the right question, the answer comes very, very easily. So oftentimes, and this is a really hard concept for people I teach all the time, is that an empowering question never, ever, ever starts with the word why. Never. Why brings in defensiveness, which brings in the ego, which brings in emotions. And when emotions go up, intelligence goes down. It's true for every human being. Even my clients who are in business, entrepreneurs who are beating themselves, why can't I do this? And why can't I do that? Right? They're shaming themselves. Then they get defensive and create a story, and you get caught in a loop. And it doesn't get you anywhere in that loop. So great leaders ask great questions. Great leaders come from a place of curiosity and not judgment. And great questions allow you to do just that. The cool thing about empowering questions is we're not just asking them of other people, we get to ask them of ourselves to help keep ourselves in check in our leadership. So, for example, and who knows, in our coaching, maybe I gave you this question once before, but I believe if we all had this on a sticky note on our laptop and on our refrigerator and on our shower, and we asked ourselves, how would the leader I want to become? Now, you could insert, how would the Christian, how would the mom, right? How would the sister? I use leaders. How would the leader I want to become do the thing I'm about to do right now? Think about
Such a powerful question.
how many people, if they really, really had that in front of them and asked, would not go over and get on the couch during the workday and scroll on Netflix, knowing that that's not the leader they want to become. Makes sense, right? So we get to keep
Mhm.
and in the sales process, it's super powerful. You know, I said my background was 26 years as a sales expert for a Fortune 100. I loved large companies. But I'm telling you, we're gonna chat about this in a minute. If I had had this tool called B.A.N.K, this system called B.A.N.K, back when I was in corporate America, you and I probably wouldn't be talking. I would have made more sales faster and easier. I'd probably be retired. I don't know. I have a lot of energy. I don't know if I could do retirement.
I don't think you could. But I'm glad you bring this up, Coach Carol, because for a number of women who I coach in ministry, they are passionate about their work. They're passionate about their message. But the moment we say the word sales, it's like, it's something in their throat. It's like, I get nervous. Palms start sweating. It just freaks them out. And I'm like, it is okay. And you taught me a lot about sales because you helped me to reframe
Yes.
sales. Let's talk about that, coach.
So most of my clients are very, like yourself, are very heart-centered entrepreneurs, right? They lead with their heart. They really, really, really want to have an impact in the world. They just don't want to ask for money. So a lot of it goes back to our childhood. Remember, most of our triggers, things that trigger us inside of us, go back to our childhood. So I would encourage you to ask, what did my parents used to say about money? Back in 2006, I absolutely self-sabotaged. I didn't know it for 10 years. I self-sabotaged my first opportunity to become a millionaire. It wasn't until 10 years later, because I was what? No longer in corporate America. I'm on this path. And I went to a millionaire mindset mastermind. And I learned that the reason I subconsciously self-sabotaged is that my dad's files were running in my head. Nobody needs that much money. You can't be a Christian and have that much money. Anybody who has that much money is greedy. Well, goodness knows I didn't want to be seen as greedy and I wanted to be seen as a Christian, so I can't have that money. Right? Folks, money is energy. And the more money you have, the greater your impact. Think about it.
Say that again. Say that
The
again.
more money you have, the greater your impact. Money is an amplifier. Excuse my language, but if you're an asshole, money just makes you a bigger asshole. But your people,
Talk about it, coach.
that's not who your people are. Your people are good people. So money as an amplifier allows them to do what? Create even more good in the world. They get to create more good in the world. So you can say, you can actually, in a sense, depending on your business, like my business as a coach, I can look at my bank account and my bank account tells me how many people I'm impacting. Think about it. So we reframe sales in 3 ways, right? First way is sales is service. If you have something that can serve somebody else and you don't share it with them, you're not even giving them the opportunity to say yes. You're doing them a disservice. And that's not who your people are. They're all in service, right? The second way we reframe it is sales is a transference of inspiration. I was just coaching someone on this today, and they said, "Well, I haven't made any sales." And I said, "You've made a ton of sales in your lifetime." They said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Have you ever gone to a movie or a restaurant that you absolutely loved? You came back and told 10 of your friends, 8 of them went to that restaurant and said, that was the best food I've ever had." That's 8 sales. I said, the question you get to ask yourself is, are you showing up that inspired when you talk about your business? Or are you just that inspired about movies and food? And this person looked at me and kind of sat back and like, better think about that one, right? So you're just transferring your inspiration. And folks, having your own business is the hardest thing you're ever going to do. Let's be honest.
For real.
It is. It's the
For
hardest
real.
thing. I tried to quit a lot of times. God wouldn't let me. Right. No, people out there, Carol. But the third way I do it is I call it the art of influence. I have a 7-step process that I teach my clients that I call the art of enrollment, which allows them to enroll people in their services and their programs without ever feeling salesy. As a matter of fact, I was speaking to a private client of mine recently, and we were role playing. I'm trying to teach her my 7-step process, right? And she did it once, and she rings me up, and she said, it worked. I got a client. Well, it didn't work exactly like it's supposed to because she decided, oh, I'm going to give them a big discount up front. That's how I'm going to get the client. That's not what we do, folks. We don't give big discounts. We add value, right? So she and I are role playing. We finally went through the whole role play one day, and she paused and she looked at me and she said, "That's exactly the process you took me through, isn't it?" Because she can look back now and say, "Oh, she asked me that question. That's exactly what she did. She asked me that question next. This is how she took control of the authority in the conversation from the beginning." So I was speaking at Nova Southeastern University in front of a bunch of HR executives a couple of years ago, and I said, "How many of you have ever heard the phrase, 'love makes the world go round'?" Right? All the hands go up. I said, "No, it doesn't." I said, "Sales makes the world go round. Love makes the ride worthwhile." If we didn't have sales, we wouldn't be on this StreamYard or Zoom. We wouldn't have clothes on. I wouldn't be able to see because I wouldn't have glasses, right? We wouldn't be eating. Nothing would exist without sales. Even if you go all the way back to the beginning of the Bible, the snake sold Eve on the apple, and then she sold Adam. That's a sales conversation. Folks, I was speaking to a lady a few weeks ago, and she says, "I am not in sales." And I said, "You told me you have 3 children." She says, "I do." And I said, "Did you ever try to sell one of them on eating broccoli instead of chocolate?" And her eyes got really big, and she looked. I said, "Oh, you must have lost that sale, huh?" Right? Because it's about influence. So you and I, we wanna help women do what? Increase their influence, impact, and income. The greater your influence, the greater your impact. The greater your impact, the greater your income. The greater your income, it goes right back in a circle. You get to create more impact. So as the queen of
Mm.
Reframe, I help them reframe their mindset around sales, reframe how to approach it, and we use Reframe in a lot of different ways. I'll tell you a funny story that a lot of your ladies might, uh, what's the word I'm looking for, relate to. So one of my clients recently said that her and her husband argue every freaking day because he won't put the toilet seat lid down. And I said, "Well, tell me how it goes. What do you think she does?" She says, "Why can't you put the toilet lid down?" So he immediately gets defensive. I told you earlier, brings in defense, ego, emotions. So I said, "I'm going to give you an empowering question. I want you to write it down. Don't change a word. They're crafted in a certain way. And I want you to say this verbatim to him tomorrow morning. Will you do that?" She said, "Yes." So I gave her the question. The question was, she's supposed to just go stand there while he finishes peeing. And I said, just be casual and say, "Honey, I'm just curious." Right? You got to come from curiosity. "I'm just curious, what one thing, because they're specific, could I do for you this morning, because they're time bound, that would help you to remember to put down the toilet seat for me?" Now, she said he happens to be a tall guy, so he's standing there. Now he's thinking. You see, she gave him the power to come up with the answer to solve her problem. He doesn't have an issue with it, she does. But she empowered him to come up with an answer for her. And he finally goes, "You know what? Take one of those sticky notes. Just put it right at my eye level, right there above the toilet." They haven't had an argument since. That's the
The power of an empowering question. Yes. Coach Carol, this is so good, but we have to take a commercial break.
okay.
And when we get back, we're going to talk about those 4 little cards
Oh,
that you were holding in your hand.
great.
so so you all stay tuned. We'll be right back after this commercial break. Hi, it's Reverend Jocelyn, and it is time to accelerate your ministry. I have had the pleasure of working with thousands of women across the country to help them to answer the call. And oftentimes when they first come to me, they're struggling with things like, how do I have clarity about my next steps? Or how do I generate revenue for my ministry? Or how do I market my ministry? These are common struggles. But this is what I've learned. You don't have to struggle alone. Support is available for you. And if you are at a place where you are serious about taking your next step as it relates to your ministry and you want to see results, I want to invite you to book a free Ministry and Business Accelerator call with me. A time where we'll talk about your challenges, we'll talk about your goals, and we'll talk about a path forward for you to get the support that you need. Now, spots are limited, so you want to act fast. But I am here to support you in taking that next step in your ministry journey. So let's accelerate your ministry together. Book your call today. Welcome back from our commercial break. I'm here with the great Coach Carol Boston, and we spent the first half of our show talking about empowering questions. But now we are going to revisit these 4 little cards that she was holding in her hand that she trained me on. And now I've seen how it's been a game changer, ladies. in my ministry. So if you've been struggling with the concept of sales, listen up. Coach Carol, could you explain to the ladies what were those 4 cards? What's the concept that you want to introduce?
The company's Codebreaker Technologies. The concept has been around for about 20 years. This is the only tool in the world that is scientifically validated. It has 2 patents to understand somebody's buying values in 90 seconds or less. Now, when I was first introduced to this, listen, I was successful in sales. I'm always open to learning something new. When I was first introduced to this, they told me that the Challey Group had done a study and that 82%, ladies, think about this, 82% of all people only buy from someone who has their same dominant code. That means if you don't know how to speak to the other 3, you're leaving 300% on the table for your competition. So I thought, I'm going to put that to the test. I sent emails to some of my clients from 5 and 6 years ago, asking them to crack their code because we can do it with the digital link as well, not just the in-person cards. And now not everybody answered, but of the ones that did, and this is when I was first introduced, 85% had my same dominant code. And I thought, oh my goodness, I just proved that true. There's something to this. Now, one of the things I love about B.A.N.K is it fit in so well with what I already teach from a leadership perspective, curiosity, empowering questions. And it teaches that it's not personal, it's personality. And oftentimes when we take things personally, right, we don't own that we're choosing. We want to blame the other person. You made me mad. I had somebody say this to me one day, you made me so mad. I said, how's that possible? Can I make you love me? No. Well, then I can't make him hate me either. You're choosing. Right? So ladies, you get to stand in your power and know that the other person is choosing. But B.A.N.K was developed by Codebreaker Technologies, and Sherry Tree, our founder, created it really just for herself. She was flat broke. She was in the financial services industry in Los Angeles, living in a storage unit for 18 months. And she finally got this guy to agree to let her invest all of his money. It was her big white elephant. She was finally going to make some money, right? So he said, bring the contract. She's in Los Angeles. She shows up to the lunch. She's 10 minutes late. She goes in, he stands up, they shake hands, they sit down, they chat for a second, and she reaches into her portfolio to pull out the contracts. And he's like, no need to pull that out. She's like, what? He said, you can imagine what I'm thinking. You were 10 minutes late to this meeting and you don't even have my money. So how are you going to treat me when you do? And that started her on this quest. She went all the way back to Hippocrates. He treated his patients in putting them in 4 temperaments. And she thought, how can I reverse engineer this? And as she tells the story, she and God went on a quest because she told God, if you will help me do this and help me make a lot of money, I will share it with everybody. Because originally she was just going to create it for herself. But it's such a valuable communication tool from a sales perspective when you realize that every conversation you have is a sales conversation. You're either getting enrolled in somebody else's vision or they're getting enrolled in yours. That's why I call my 7-step process, and it now includes B.A.N.K, but it didn't before, the art of enrollment. How good are you at influencing or enrolling somebody as a leader to do what you want them to do? So B.A.N.K stands for blueprint, action, nurture, and knowledge. Each one of these speaks a different buying language. When you look at something like DISC or Myers-Briggs, those are based in psychology. And to take one of those tests typically costs you about $197 and takes you 45 minutes. You can crack your code with us for $0, get a complimentary report, and you can do it in 90 seconds or less. One of the things I love about B.A.N.K is it's simple, because I've always said in all my talks over these last years that simple is doable. Complex, that's just interesting, right? I know you have either been to a conference or a seminar, or you know someone who did, and you said to them, how was it? And they went, well, it was interesting. Because they didn't walk away with anything that was simple to do. It was too complicated. Does that make sense?
It does, it does. And when you started using this in your business, as a tool, what difference did B.A.N.K make in helping you to connect better with clients who might not have the same code as you?
Oh my goodness. So nobody gets to meet with me without cracking their code first. That's how vital I believe this is. And if anybody slips through the crack, and they get on a Zoom with me, the very first thing we do, I pull up my site and we crack the code first. So, for example, one of the roles I currently have is the business coach inside of a high-end mastermind. And so my last code, as you can see on the screen, is A. Folks, we all have all 4 codes in us. Everybody does, to varying degrees, and there's 24 combinations. So it's also important to know the combination, because a B.N, like me, will show up very differently than a B.K or a B.A. So this lady happened to be an A.N. She was a high dominant A. A is my last code. So we get on the call and we say hello and some niceties. And all of a sudden I went, "We're going to have so much fun today." She went, she almost came out of her chair. She goes, "That's why I'm here. I want to have fun." Folks, if I had not been what I call bankified, educated, I would have never done that. That's not in my code at all. I didn't change who I was. I changed my languaging and showing up for her. We have a phenomenal relationship now. We know exactly how to connect. Does that
I
make
love
sense?
how you said yeah, I think that that keyword connection and speaking their language because you can have the same product and it can absolutely help someone, but if you're speaking the wrong code, it's like speaking French to someone who speaks English. It's just not gonna connect. But if you speak in their language, it's like, "You get me. You understand what I value," and that's where the
Yes.
magic happens.
It is, because remember, every conversation you have, the person on the other side, they're probably doing it subconsciously, but they're saying MMFI, MMFI, make me feel important. And when people feel seen and heard, they feel important. Oftentimes I close, my mentor in bank, we do a Facebook live show every week on bank. And oftentimes I close it with a quote from Nelson Mandela. And Nelson Mandela said this. He said, "When you speak to them in a language they understand, they hear it with their head. But when you speak to them in their language, they hear it with their heart." And that's exactly what we teach you to do at bank, because people must know that they buy on emotion and justify with logic. You want them to feel something. And in order to do that, you get to speak into their language for that to happen, right?
Yes, and Coach Carroll, this is something where there's a lot to learn as it relates to bank, but this is let's consider this almost like an introduction because I'm grateful that you are actually one of our feature speakers at our upcoming conference, our ministry launch conference, and so you're going to be able to really share a little bit more information on this concept of bank, helping women to feel more comfortable with making their offer and integrating bank into what they do so they can have a greater impact. And so I'm like over the moon excited about you sharing this at our
Me too.
upcoming conference.
I love being able to share. Do we have time for a really quick story, personal story?
We got about 1 minute before yep, so we got about a minute.
Okay, I'm gonna go fast. My older brother and I had no relationship. My dad died very unexpectedly. He was my whole family to me. My, older brother was executor of the estate. I mean, we had no relationship. But before I flew out to the funeral, I rung him up and I said, "Hey, David, I would really like to improve my communication with you. If I send you this link, it'll take you less than 90 seconds, blah, blah." "Just send it to me," he says. So I did. But the beauty of it is he cracked it. Now, I was shocked when I looked at his code. I thought, I've never seen that side of him. It proved invaluable. I go out to Texas. He comes in the next day. He rings me up, "Come downstairs. Let's talk." So I go downstairs, and the first thing he does is he pushes a bottle of water at me across the table. Now I'm aware. I'm like, oh, that's his way of being nurturing to me. He knows I drink more water than anybody in the family. He went right into his stress code, because we'll talk about that. One of these codes, folks, is your stress code. And it's important to know when somebody's in their stress code, they're not going to act, think, talk, behave, and make the same decisions as they would in their dominant code. So 3 months later, whatever it was, Father's Day. Now, I have never been introduced to my brother's 2 daughters. Never. Don't know their grandchildren. But I made sure in my text, he likes to communicate via text. I sent him a text for Father's Day. I included them in the text. Can I tell you it was the first time ever that he replied back and didn't scream at me in text. There was no capital letters. There was no 5 exclamations. There was no 5 question marks. It just said, "Thank you very much." And I'm like, man, this works.
That's huge,
This
coach, because I'm hearing you say it's more than just sales is also relationships and
Yes.
how you can use bank. And we are
Yes.
all relational beings.
Yes. Right.
That's amazing.
And that's where we get our biggest challenges, right?
Mhm.
Is in those
Mhm.
relationships, and it's often because our ego gets involved. We want to be right. How many times have you said to somebody, "I don't understand why you don't get it. I'm speaking very clearly." Well, yeah, if you're speaking English and I speak German, you might be. I can't hear you, right? I just can't hear you. And so it's super important, and I bet you've had a time where you met somebody for the first time and you walked away thinking, "They feel like they've been my best friend for life." You're probably speaking the same code,
Yeah, the connection
right?
is there. But
It makes it
imagine
easy.
what it would be like for you to be able to have a system in place, and this is what bank has done, to be able to
Absolutely.
understand someone's code, what they value,
Yes.
and as it relates to in ministry, if you're about to meet with them, you can have a report in place to be able to speak with them. So this is what we're gonna do. This is just a teaser, people. Again, ladies, you wanna be at the upcoming event where she's gonna be doing a training on this. But if you're like, I can't wait until this event. I want to meet with her before then." We're going to put all of her information in the show notes so you can have a follow up conversation. But before we close our time together, if there is just one final quote or remark that you would like to share with our sisters, or even we have some brothers who might be listening today to encourage them.
Most often, this is what I say because I believe it. It's how I am still standing, in my opinion, is that you get to, not you need to, not you have to, but you get to trust the process and just take the next step. I believe that God only gave me a lamplight for my feet because all I get to do is take the next step and trust in the process. It's powerful work. I'm telling you right now, if God had shown me everything he was gonna take me through these last 10 years, I would have quit. I mean, I would have found a way to quit. I don't know where I'd be sleeping, but I'd have quit because it's hard, but it's worthwhile. And he's always there, right? He's right there in the thick of it with us if we allow that to happen. So I would, if you're on the fence about coming to this conference, trust the process, invest and take the next step because we it's a blessing and an opportunity that we get to invest in ourselves by hiring other people who are a few steps ahead of us or a few years ahead of us so that we can not have all the pitfalls that they already experienced. We can get to where they are faster and easier. And that's what having a good coach does. Whatever area of your life that you get to have a coach in. So I think I rambled a little bit longer than one thought, but it all tied together.
It was a good thought, though. It was a really good thought. So, no problem. I love it, Coach Carol. You have been a blessing to me, and I appreciate how you've helped me reframe, be very conscious of the language I use, and I'm no longer afraid of sales. Selling is service. So
So
so we appreciate you, and I know we'll be spending more time together at this upcoming conference and doing some great work. But God bless you, Coach Carol. Thank you
thank
for helping a number of people across this country to make impact.
thank you very much. My pleasure.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Coach Carol. And thank you all for tuning in to another conversation. I hope you were encouraged. I hope that you have reframed some of your thinking around sales, and maybe you'll be more mindful of the questions that you ask as a result of our time together. And if you enjoyed this episode, here's what I'm asking you to do: go ahead and slam that subscribe button, share this with a friend, and be sure, if you haven't already, get your tickets for our upcoming Ministry Launch Conference on January 23rd and 24th. It's a virtual event, so you can tune in from the comfort of your home. We'll have all the information in our show notes for you to join us. We'll also have Coach Carol's information, and we can't wait to see you next week for another episode. But until then, you stay encouraged, you be blessed. I'll see you next week, family.